Chintana Mahinda Rajapaksa has totally ignored all this. I think that in many ways those issues have been addressed, but then there is also certain issues that the opposition candidate and a lot of the opposition uh, parties brought up into this election campaign, like corruption. They didn't substantiate a lot of these things, but that was always in there. Wastage, you know, we can talk about the jumbo cabinet, but there are certain constitutional constraints which make for a jumbo cabinet. But certain appointments, we appointed certain people to certain things, whether they were capable, whether they delivered, and why persist with them if they did not deliver. These are questions that the people will have. In terms of you know good governance, in terms of accountability, transparency, and all those things, within the whole idea of development, where are we going? What kind of country are we going to have? Are we going to be self-sufficient? Are we going to have food security? Are we going to have food sovereignty? Are our genetic resources going to be protected? What kind of environmental regulations do we have? Do we bring in to our development practices? Those within what frameworks do we operate? All those issues, I think Mahinda Rajapaksa in his second term has to take as being very important and being very crucial. Then others can also argue that our system of governance is flawed, that our institutional structures are inadequate, that there are no proper checks and balances. That I am not sure how important those things are for the ordinary people like me and other people.
But do you also think that the rights and the personal liberties of the people should take precedence over development?
See, you can't say this first, that next. You can't violate human rights just to build a dam, right? You can't use slave labor. You can't turn people into slaves to build a dam. There are things that you have to weigh. And I don't think that it's a good thing in the long term to neglect those other things that you mentioned: human rights,
Personal liberties.
yeah, personal liberties. Personal liberties take a hit when you're fighting terrorism, but this is not this is post LTT. This is post terrorism. So there are certain inadequacies in our system, some of which can be traced back to the horrendous constitution that the United National Party gave us, J.R. Jayawardene in 1978, and the inbuilt resistance to constitutional reform. Mahinda Rajapaksa will have to find a way out of that. It's not going to be easy, but that is very important, that we get our system, institutional structure corrected. Otherwise, how do we proceed? I mean, we can just do some development here, do something here, but the accountability, transparency, we don't know who's going to come in here. We don't know what kind of human beings are terribly flawed. They are greedy and they're power hungry. They don't want to. They want to look after themselves. They are not necessarily looking after you or me. So those institutional arrangements have to be looked at, and those flaws have to be corrected. So he has to find a way of doing that. Those are as important as development, but the thrust has to be development, I think.
And what can you say about the role of the opposition, and how should they take this defeat, and what is their role in that context?
Now supposing Mahinda Rajapaksa had lost, right? There will be people who think, okay, this is the end of the world. The world doesn't end that easily, There's a song by the Eagles, I think, things in this world change very slowly, if they ever change at all. There are no great defeats, no great victories. This is not the moment to hang yourself or commit suicide if your candidate lost. And if your candidate won, this is not the time to go, taking revenge. It's just a small thing. But there's a problem again in the constitution, which not only makes the person who wins the presidential election extremely powerful, right? It makes the opposition necessarily weak, right? You can't blame Ranil Wickremesinghe for being a weak leader. There may be certain problems that he has, but even if it is the strongest leader, even if it was J.R. Jayawardene, Mrs. Bandaranaike was not a weak leader, but she she couldn't manage to be to develop to form a solid formidable opposition to J.R. Jayawardene because of the constraints of the constitution. It didn't help that certain people gave Supreme Court determinations to allow people to cross over and so on, which held the president to ransom and made for political instability. Those things don't help either. But the opposition, now the thing is, the opposition can't be a great opposition because of the constraints, but it doesn't have to be a useless opposition either. It has a responsibility in this whole business of governance. It has to be critical of the government when it's wrong. It has to be critical of the president. It has to, for example, a lot of people talk about the 17th Amendment. That why was it not implemented? Why are the independent institutions just not effective? Why the Constitutional Council not being appointed? But I didn't see the opposition, the United National Party or the Janata Vimukti Peramuna, which actually authored the 17th Amendment, doing their Jana Bala Mehuma for that. They were doing their Jana Bala Mehuma for 100 rupees per litre of petrol and stuff like that. But this important element of governance they just neglected. Why? Because it was
yes,
we have to go back
for election result, and we will be back with you.